welcome to Themis Podcasts. Themis is a risk management firm specialising in financial crime. Our aim of these podcasts is to bring you interesting news, interviews and recordings of our exclusive events from the world of financial crime. Illegal logging, at the nexus of climate change and financial crime. In this podcast, Carel van Randwyck, Themis' Chief Growth Officer, speaks to Marc Jessel, Chief System Integrity Officer at the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, to discuss what can be done to increase the sustainability of forestry and reduce illegal logging, and how firms can ensure they are not unwittingly exposed through their supply chains.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Themis Financial Crime Podcast. Today's session is about sustainable and illegal logging, where sustainability and ESG meets financial crime. Deforestation and forest degradation, according to a study by Interpol, contribute anywhere between 6 and 17% of global carbon emissions to the atmosphere. Without addressing deforestation and forest degradation, it will not be possible to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. There is also a close link between illegal logging and the illegal wildlife trade, as they share the same networks: transport, financial, and bribery and corruption. And illegal logging results in destruction of critical habitats required for rare species to live and survive. My name is Carel van Randwyck, Themis Chief Growth Officer. I have a particular interest in the intersection between environmental and financial crime, especially in the context of climate change. Today, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Marc Jessel, Chief System Integrity Officer with the Forest Stewardship Council, otherwise known as the FSC. For those unfamiliar with the FSC, it certifies that forests, and hence the wood sourced from those forests, are managed to strict environmental, social, and economic standards. More than 200 million hectares of forest are managed to FSC standards around the world, and the FSC is the most trusted forestry certifier, yet only certifies approximately 6% of the world's forests. These statistics raise many questions, but more of that later. Marc, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me, Carol.
Pleasure. Firstly, Marc, would you please explain to our audience the origin and purpose of the FSC, what the FSC does in its certification process, and how this helps identify that wood is sourced from sustainably managed forests, and then about your role.
So FSC was set up on the back of the Rio Earth Summit back in 1993. And it was created with, as a stated purpose, to promote the responsible management of forests globally. So we are a membership-based, multi-stakeholder organization. We are based in Bonn, Germany. And the core mechanism through which we achieve that objective of promoting responsible management of forests is through certification. And we certify different aspects of forest management and the activities that emerge from forest management. So we have a forest management certificate, suite of certificates, we have chain of custody certificates, and we have controlled wood certificates. Those are the core certificates that we provide. My role as Chief System Integrity Officer is really to ensure that, first and foremost, there are no false claims within the system. There are no violations of our standard, in other words. So I oversee investigations, transaction verification loops, integrity investigations around the world to ensure that basically what you get on your certificate is in line with the norms and standards of the FSC. I also look after another aspect of system integrity, which is what we call dispute management. And this is fundamentally about handling any complaints around our system, or indeed investigating any violations of our policy for association, which I'll be happy to say a bit more about later on.
Marc, thank you very much. That's huge. It's all encompassing. It's you do have a lot on your plate as a result of that, even though you cover only 6% of the world's forests. In a previous exchange between us, you mentioned that the FSC certified that less than 6% of the world's forests. In which areas of the world do you provide certification of timber, and how does this help reduce unsustainable logging in those areas?
So our certified forests are found pretty much in every part of the world. I mean, I would say that there are certain countries where you will find, a high concentration of certified forests, and other countries where you would have many more chain of custody certificates. The country in the world where we have by far the largest number of chain of custody certificates is China. The country in the world where, up until recently, the most recent events, we had the largest hectarage of forest management certificates was Russia. There are big concentrations of certified forest in the Americas and in Africa to a somewhat lesser extent, but particularly in the Congo Basin, and of course in parts of Asia. We also have big concentrations of certified forests. So how does it contribute towards the reduction of risks around illegal logging? Well, I think it's important to state that we don't claim to be the sole actor in this field. At the end of the day, FSC is a voluntary scheme, but it does have certain features which certainly play a meaningful role in reducing the risk of illegal logging. I mentioned the policy for association, which is a very unique feature of FSC. This is a set of 6 unacceptable activities to FSC. One of those is deforestation. What it means is that any company that is certified by FSC signs up to the policy for association, and by signing up to that policy for association, accepts that it or any of the companies that it is associated with, has a controlling stake over, cannot be involved in illegal logging. So illegal logging is proscribed, by FSC through the the policy for association. In addition to that, we have all of our standards are very, very clear in ensuring that certificate holders have to comply with the laws of the land. So in a sense, we are both verifying that companies are operating in line with the policy for association, and also through our certifying bodies ensuring that companies do not violate laws of the land with regards to deforestation.
That's really all-encompassing if you think about it, from source to end user, and that helps to track timber through the supply chain. What I have been led to believe is that due to illegal logging, there is often a mixing of timber between that had been sourced from those plantations which have the necessary permits and then those that are sourced from nearby forests where there aren't permits to extract timber. This is something that I find very interesting, yet it is very difficult to manage. And if you're transporting timber and you're receiving that timber as part of the whole supply chain, that becomes a real challenge in terms of certification or verifying where that timber has come from.
So indeed, we do certify what we call controlled wood. So this is wood coming from non-certified sources. And the way in which we provide an assurance that these that the wood coming from these uncertified sources it does not contribute towards either conversion or deforestation or the destruction of higher conservation values is through national risk assessments. So these risk assessments are developed by working groups, normally within the country, endorsed by FSC International, and they are very specific in identifying the risk areas that a certifying body needs to be aware of. And when a certifying body conducts an audit, it will be seeking to ensure that the certificate holder is compliant with that national risk assessment. So it's a very different kind of approach towards monitoring. It's very risk-based, and it's a different set of, it's a different approach conducted by the certifying bodies. But it does enable us to meet the demand for certified FSC wood, and through the risk-based approach enables us to ensure that these kind of violations in terms of deforestation are not carried out. Where they do carry out, and of course this is sort of within my scope of system integrity, obviously investigations are conducted. By and large, it is a tool that is overall fit for purpose.
Wow, thank you for explaining that. And I mentioned, you mentioned that you undertake national risk assessments to make sure that the organizations that are providing wood operate within the national laws, meet your policy of association, etc. What are the other challenges that you've come across to address illegal logging or deforestation? Because there's often a lot of complicity by local officials, government officials, etc., to bypass the normal channels of obtaining certification, but also authorization to extract timber from forests.
Yeah, there are a whole range of different scenarios. I mean, the one scenario which has certainly come to our attention relatively recently is loopholes really being exploited by certificate holders, and that's often loopholes in national legislation. Just to give the example of Russia, in Russia, there has been an investigation around sanitary fellings. So we know that globally there's been a real kind of increase in wood designated as salvage logging or sanitary logging, which has either been affected by fires, by other sort of natural calamities, or by disease like bark beetle that we're seeing a lot here in Europe. And what it's translated into is in some countries where the legislation is not tight enough, certain certificate holders claiming that wood is classified as sanitary felled wood, a sanitary timber, whereas in actual fact it really is not. And there you are indeed contributing. If you're allowing that to pass, you're contributing to deforestation. So those loopholes need to be monitored, and of course, our job then is to ensure through our engagement with stakeholders that there's awareness raised about these loopholes, and that they can then be plugged, addressed by the countries themselves. Or if need be, we have to actually go for a much more assertive approach, let's say. For example, in one of the regions of Russia, this is all before the current Ukraine war, we introduced a moratorium on all sanitary felled wood from a particular province in a particular region in Russia, until we could assure ourselves that the conditions were in place to ensure that a phytosanitary certificate was actually bona fide.
And then you're mentioning Russia just now, but from my own understanding, the large areas of a natural tropical rainforest that are subject to illegal logging or deforestation tend to be the Amazon basin, Central Africa. You mentioned earlier the Democratic Republic of Congo, but there are all sorts of there are all a range of countries around there that are exporting timber, etc. And you've also got Southeast Asia, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, the island of Borneo, the Sarawak for Malaysia, etc. And there are all sorts of illicit activities, bribing, corruption, bribery to obtain necessary certification, etc. So what are you seeing on the ground in those areas, and which jurisdictions of the world do you see that licenses are being approved under questionable circumstances? And to what extent do you have people on the ground being able to assess those activities?
So the way in which we go about assessing those activities is through quite I'd say probably quite a complex system that relies on a number of different actors. The most important kind of grouping of operators in terms of upholding system integrity are the certifying bodies themselves. So those are the organizations that very much are on the ground and who are responsible for conducting audits of certificate holders. Monitoring the certifying bodies and accrediting them is our assurance and accreditation partner, Assurance Services International, otherwise known as ASI, and they are acting on our behalf as the sort of accreditation entity, who also have assessors that are scattered across the world. My team is mostly based in Bonn, although because of the prevalence or the importance of China, we do have two colleagues who are based in China and who enable us to monitor issues there. The kind of different patterns, I suppose, around the world, they differ. I gave you one example as far as the sort of sanitary fellings were concerned. Another sort of scenario that we see in the Amazon, for example, is what you call inventory fraud, where there are illicit payments made between a non-certified forest management unit and a certified forest management unit, which enables them to launder their wood through with an FSC label. So this inventory fraud is obviously something that we monitor carefully, and we investigate in countries where we deem it to be a risk. And talking about risk, I think it's important, Carol, just for me to update listeners on the fact that because we have grown quite significantly, we have around 50,000 certificates globally. We're now at a stage where we really do need to be much more risk based, much more that we tailor our treatment of certificate holders to the level of risk that comes with them. So we're introducing a risk-based interventions model, which essentially is a model that uses data, historical data from within FSC, as well as data sets that are globally recognized, for example, from the Corruption Perceptions Index, that if you mix those sort of data sets together and apply a kind of data science approach to them, you are able to, and we are developing the first iteration of a model that gives us a risk score per certificate holder. And that in turn then will have in the future an impact on how we treat each certificate holder, with implications for the certifying bodies out there in the field.
Oh, that's fascinating that you're going to this risk-based model. I come from a banking background where, again, you look at a risk-based approach when you look at customers, transactions, flows of funds, etc. And thinking about the transport of timber worldwide, it all depends very much on an international logistics and financial system to, one, transport the commodity from source to processor and ultimately to market, and two, to finance and insure the timber during that journey. Timber companies shipping both legal and illegal timber have repeatedly been used as fronts for concealing illegal wildlife products as well. There is a real linkage between illegal logging and the illegal wildlife trade. Many ecosystems are being destroyed in the tropical rainforests as a result of illegal logging. And as a result, the wildlife that depends on that is also being severely impacted. Commingling of legal timber with illegal wildlife products also presents considerable challenges in terms of identifying whether the trade of flora and fauna is legitimate. What would you recommend that logistics firms, insurers, and banks do to ensure that they're not unwittingly involved in transporting, insuring, and financing timber that has been sourced illegally or under questionable contracts, and the potential fines and reputation damage to their business that could result? And to what extent could they use the FSC certification process and certifications to minimize this risk?
So I think, the first thing to say is that as a scheme, we've never campaigned for green lanes for FSC labeled products. We don't think that that's appropriate. It would send the wrong message. And we strongly encourage companies that are in the wood trading business to put in place very robust due diligence systems, their own due diligence systems. We feel that if you combine a good due diligence system with FSC certification, then you can begin to give yourself an assurance that you are able to trade in timber that comes from legitimate sources, and you're able to assure the integrity of the supply chain. So, I mean, companies that are certainly exporting wood from the source through supply chains to a final outlet, we would certainly encourage them and invite them to, if they're not already, go for chain of custody certification. And I think, if you're in the shipping business, then it may indeed be attractive to think of using FSC certification as an additional layer of insurance against the risk that you are somehow complicit in illegally trading or in trading wood that comes from illegal sources. That's the product of deforestation.
Marc, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a really fascinating discussion and a really important topic because deforestation, illegal logging, its impact on climate change, and also how you, the FSC, are helping to manage forests sustainably is helping to reduce climate change. And this is just such a high a topic on the agenda of the United Nations, the world's governments, etc., on how we have to manage our economies and reduce the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere.
Thanks very much indeed for this opportunity. Pleasure to talk.
Thank you for listening to the latest Themis podcast. We hope you found it interesting and informative. If you would like to find out more about Themis, get in touch with us via our website, www.crime.financial. You can also subscribe for future news and interviews.